Hello, welcome to Cozy Costume Creations. I'm Sarah Beth. I had two master's programs, one in costume technology and one in costume crafts. And I'm here cozy at home with my cute hamster. This is Hambo. Oh my goodness. Isn't he the cutest? He's such a good boy. And today I'm going to teach you how to do a block print. So let's get started.
And here's something to just give me a little extra street cred, because you can't trust everybody on the internet. But this is me teaching a lab at USITT just a few months ago in Columbus. USITT is United States Institute of Theater Technology, and every year they have a national conference. And I was really honored because I got to teach a workshop there this year. So I taught it about the chemistry and safety of dyeing, and then we did a hands-on block print lab. And it was a lot of fun. So I have taught this at a national conference, which is kind of cool. So I'm using a lot of the images I used in my PowerPoint to present to them. So there you go, a little fun. Also, that said, I would highly recommend going to USITT if you have an interest in costume technology as it pertains to live performance. There's some really great stuff. I always have a lot of fun. I love USITT. Anyway, on to the block print. So this is a block print. A block print, so print, it means it is a topical dye treatment, right? So it's something that you kind of print or stamp onto the top of the fabric. It's not what we call true blue through and through. So if you're doing like an immersion dye of a fabric, both sides of the fabric should be the same color by the end of it, right? This is not the case with a print because it's kind of a topical treatment. So one side of your fabric is going to have a much more saturated, colorful, beautiful print, and the other side is going to be much, much more desaturated, right? So it's a print, right? That's also when you go to Joann's, RIP, and you pick up, just like a cotton print. One side of the fabric has the nice, beautiful, cute little design, and the other side is very desaturated, right? And it's just not the same cute little design on the opposite side, right? Because it's a print, so it is printed on one side and not the other. So that's why it's called a block print. It's called a block because traditionally they used blocks of wood that they would carve out these designs, and then they would put that in the dye or the paint and then put it onto the fabric. So that's why it's called a block print. So the first thing I'm going to teach you how to do is to make your block or a stamp. In this case, I just got this rubber blank off of Amazon. It might be called a stamp blank, rubber blank, same thing, right? So it's just a chunk of rubber. And we're going to carve out our designs from it. You can really use anything to do this, though. A lot of people use potatoes. That's a really common one used in dyeing, actually, in block prints. It's very fun. You can also do it like they did traditionally, where you carve it out of a wood block. Obviously, you'd use different techniques for that, different tools. But yeah, so I'm going to teach you how to do this out of rubber stamp, but you could really use anything. So you're going to want your stamp blank, you want a ruler, a pencil, and scissors. You can use any scissors. Craft scissors work great. Don't use your fabric scissors. And what I did is I took the ruler and I made little 2-inch by 2-inch squares out of what I had, right? Because I just wanted to have, just little small ones for everybody to use. So I cut it down first to the size I wanted. And then I grabbed a piece of paper and then I put that little square on it, and then I traced around it, right? So that I know how big my canvas is going to be for this. So then I drew my cute little cherry blossom design that I wanted onto my piece of paper. Now, you don't have to use paper at all. You can draw directly on the rubber stamp and go from there. But I think it's really helpful to draw out what you want onto a piece of paper, because you want your stamp to be the mirror image of what you want. Now, this doesn't matter for like a flower or something organic like that, right? But if you're doing letters or writing someone's name, you're going to get it backwards if you write it directly onto your stamp. And then, you cut it out, and then you're going to get the opposite, the mirror image, right? So that's why I like to draw it beforehand so that I don't mess myself up, The other reason is I actually had a very clever student in my dyes and paints class, and what she did is she drew out what she wanted her stamp to look like, and then she just put her rubber on top of it, and so she was able to get the graphite to transfer from the paper onto the stamp, and it made her life a little easier. So I would recommend doing that. I think that's a great idea. This is why teaching is great, because you learn stuff from your students. I was like, that was clever. Look at you. One thing I would add to what she did, though, is if you press down on the stamp and then take like the rubber and the paper with you and rub them together, like you don't want to rub the stamp across the graphite, like across the piece of paper, like the paper is stationary, and the, because that's just messy, right? You want to take the whole thing. If you can get both layers to move at the same time and you rub them, then you get a much better transfer. So that's my little addition to her brilliant idea. So this is what you get when you kind of rub it, right? So I've got this little bit of a rubbing, and it does give you a nice place to start, right? And you can see pretty clearly now how this is mirror image, right? So again, keep that in mind. Whatever you draw on the stamp, you're going to get the mirror image of that when you actually stamp it, right? You can see that more clearly here. I'd also say you can directly draw your pencil straight onto the rubber. There's no issue with that. But I like this way, just to keep things straight. So after you kind of rubbed it, you can get, you take your pencil and you just clean up those lines a little bit so you can kind of see this is in process, still a little bit to do, right? And then, finish up those lines, and here you go. Again, you can see it's a mirror image, right? So now we've got our stamp ready to be carved. So this is where you're going to use an X-Acto knife. So what I do is I just take the X-Acto knife, and I just, on the outside of just my outside lines, I just take it around it, right? And that just makes the next step a little bit easier. So you just trace your outside lines with your X-Acto blade. Nice and easy. Don't cut yourself. So this next tool we're going to use is called a skeever. It's a leather tool that's used to shave down parts of your leather. And it's a great tool for this. It's so fun. You can also use this on foam, lots of other things. It's very satisfying. I love using this tool. So what you're going to do is you're just going to scoop around the outside of this first, right? You can actually cut away the full outside if you want. I could, trim this down and not make it a square, make it more circular, anything. But first I just want to, on my outside edges, I just want to scoop down about like 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. Like I need to get that stuff away, because remember, whatever is the positive part, right? The part that's sticking out, the highest part, that's what is going to be touching the die. So that's what's going to be your actual end product design. So I want to cut this outside away so it's not part of that, right? So that's what we're doing here. And look at this tool. I love it. It goes through this stuff like butter. It is so satisfying. I really love doing this. It's so fun. And I hope you guys have fun doing this. Like, please try it. It's so satisfying. Also, do be careful though, because it is sharp. It is meant to cut leather, and you are made of leather. So, be careful. But yeah, very fun. So I've, taken my X-Acto knife and I've cut, just an outline around the edges. And that's what makes this easier as I'm coming in and getting closer to my actual design, because there's already a cut in there, right? So that's what makes that part a little bit easier. So definitely do that step before this. And then you can just take that guy and just shave the rest away. It's delicious. And I do grab my X-Acto and kind of touch it up a little bit here and there. Needs to go a little deeper sometimes. Need a little more edge for a difficult area. I've got my X-Acto blade coming in and cutting a little bit deeper into that nice, beautiful little corner. Then coming in with my skeever. So that really helps keep that X-Acto blade nearby, especially if you have any corners or kind of points. And they can kind of shave away the rest of it, right? And you do get a lot of rubber shavings, so don't forget to clean up. So the total time that this takes to do the block print, especially if you're just doing like 1 or 2 stamps, this takes between like half an hour and 45 minutes. So this isn't a super time-consuming craft. So I think this one's a nice, pretty manageable one. So as I've gotten that outside, now I'm getting a little bit more careful and getting my edges really beautiful, because remember, whatever is left over, that is my stamp. So I'm cleaning up this outside and getting it closer to where I want, and trying to get that outside plane to, again, kind of be like 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch lower than the rest of my stamp. Now let's do the inside. So I'm going to do what I did on the outside. I didn't show you guys this step, but same thing that I did on the outside edge, where I take my X-Acto blade and then I kind of just cut around the outside edge of my inside lines, right? So I'm doing that on my little inside. And kind of as I did this, I realized it was going to be really hard to make the little lines and keep that nice little bulb at the end. It's just like too delicate. So I ended up making them just lines. And then, yeah, I'm going to do the inside of my petals. And I do at least a pencil width. You want maybe a little bit more. Yeah, give yourself a little bit of space because you don't want it too close of a cut that you don't have a stamp anymore. That said, you can, if you cut through the layers, you can glue this back together. Like, it's just rubber, right? It happened to one of my students, and he said that super glue was great. It worked wonderfully for kind of gluing back edges. So he cut a little too far, used a little super glue. It was fine. So it's okay. Mistakes can happen too, and that's fine. It won't be the end of the world. It'll be okay. There's something you can do to fix it. Or you could run with it and, change your design, depending on what it is, where you cut it. You could use some creativity. Happy accidents, right? X-Acto is so satisfying. So once I pull out my skeever, then I'm going to go and start somewhere innocuous, like right in the middle, so that if I make a mistake, it's going to be okay. But you can see the edges of where I've cut into the X-Acto, cut with the X-Acto, kind of pulling up. And that makes this much easier, because that first cut makes it want to come where you already cut, where you want it to go, instead of it being a little harder to control. I also probably didn't go deep enough, so that's why I took in my X-Acto, did a little more. So I keep my X-Acto nice nearby throughout this whole thing, and it really helps. So there we go. I'm trying to make the inside as deep as the outside, right? I want those to pretty much be on the same plane. I don't think I got quite that far with this guy. I think these all ended up being like a little shallower than the outside, and that's okay. Really, as long as they're less, they're deeper in than like your little outside lines, then they shouldn't get too much dye on them. But we'll talk about that later. And you can see there can sometimes be a bit of a bleed and a little bit of a transfer. See again how the X-Acto, this really just pulls up because of where it's already been. And then just to get that extra little point, pulling in the X-Acto and getting those edges really clean. And that makes this come out really easy. Much, much better. Oh, so satisfying. So satisfying. Guys, I love doing this. I love block prints so much. So you get the idea of how to do the stamp. So I'm going to talk about a few other things. One other thing you can do that's very cool is you can make different layers of a design and make different stamps. And so what they would historically do is they'd have these block prints for like borders or, something, whatever it is. And they might have like 3 or 4 different blocks that they would put in different colors, and then they could stamp them on top of each other. And then you get this beautiful multicolor texture design with these different things going on. So that's really fun, very cool. And you could absolutely do that with, these rubber stamps. Another fascinating fact about block printing is it originated in China, supposedly, about 4,000 years ago. And what's really cool about it is that it's become really popular in so many other nations, that like other places became really famous for their block prints. India specifically was really famous for their block prints, but there are a lot of places in Africa too that have amazing, beautiful block prints to this day, which is really cool. So the earliest known extant block print that we have is actually a book. It's the Diamond Sutra, and it was done with a block print. And it's done on paper, it's not on fabric, but it is a block print, and it's the oldest one that we have, which is really cool. It's kind of rad because I feel like block printing is kind of the precursor to the Gutenberg press. But yeah, so now we're coming down to the end of this, shaking off all the excess little bits and pieces, and we're almost ready to do an actual block print. So here we go, here's my stamp. Isn't it cute? So now we're going to prepare the stamp pad. So what I did is I just cut out a little piece of felt. So this is what, like 2 inches by 4 inches, a little piece of felt. And I stuck it with plastic because I'm about to pour a whole ton of Dynaflow on top of it. So you can use many different types of dyes and paints. I really like to use either acrylic paint that is mixed with fabric medium. You can just use acrylic paint, but it's best when you're using it on fabric to mix it with a fabric medium so that it kind of waters it down a little bit and makes it so that it can bond to the fabric a little bit better and makes it kind of less flaky, right? So you can use acrylic paint, but I would recommend using a fabric medium if you do so. So what I'm using here is called Dynaflow. It's a great dye paint. It's really awesome. It is actually also acrylic based. I love Dynaflow. That said, when I contacted the company, Dynaflow, I think it's Jacquard sells it, so I contacted them and I was like, hey, I'm going to do this lecture. Is it okay if I, use your product in it? And, can I get your SDS sheet for the chemical? And they were like, yeah, totally. And they're like, what's it for though? And I was like, yeah, I'm doing a block print. And they were like, oh, how interesting. We don't usually use this for block prints because it's so watery. And I was like, oh, I know. So it is a little bit watery for this, but my favorite is when Dynaflow has aged a little bit. It gets a little bit denser, it gets a better viscosity, it gets a little chunkier, and it is so good for block prints. I really like it. I'm going to show you a little bit more later, but some chunky Dynaflow, it's so good for a block print. So what I did is I then poured the Dynaflow onto my little stamp pad, my little thing of felt, and that's why you have the plastic underneath so that, it doesn't spill everywhere and get all the places because Dynaflow flows. So now I got a little stamp pad made. And of course you could use foam, you could use a sponge, you could use something else rather than felt. But here we go. So I'm going to grab my stampy stamp and then I'm going to stick it face down into my stamp pad. I'm going to give it a little press, and then I'm going to pull it up, and there we have it! Yay! So very exciting. I will say, though, so this is what the people at Dynaflow were talking about, where you see how this is a very flowy dye paint. So it's kind of getting everywhere, so this is not the most ideal, and you can see why this isn't the most ideal product, because it's kind of getting everywhere. It's a little bit too liquidy to do what we really want. That's why aged Dynaflow is the best. But we're going to see what this does. I'll show you. So there we have it. So this is the block print. This is on just a piece of white muslin, right? And pretty good, pretty nice transfer, pretty cute. The Dynaflow is not bad. I really do like it. You can see how there's that bit at the bottom. That's part of the stamp. So if we look back at the stamp, you see that part that's got the Dynaflow on it. That's what transferred, right? So I could clean it before I put it on the fabric. That'd be one way to do it. Another is I could cut away this extra bit. I could just cut around the whole object if I wanted. I could make it circular. I could just, get rid of a lot of the extra stuff. So if you don't like those little lines, that's how to do that. Clean it away, cut it away, or you can use a less flowy dye to do this. For myself, I kind of like leaving a little something sometimes because it adds that human touch, right? So sometimes I like to have a little bit of that extra bit of the stamp, just that, those happy accidents. Sometimes I like that because it's look, a human made this. Isn't that fun? And you'll see that sometimes on when you buy handmade block prints. You can see just I don't know, the imperfections that make it perfect. I don't know. I don't know, in a mechanical world with all this manufactured crap, make something a little human, a little imperfect, a little je ne sais quoi. So if you don't like using the stamp pad, you can also use these cute little sponge brushes. They're also really great for applying the dye or paint to your block print. You can also use paint brushes. You can also use like those foam rollers. Those are really great too. So you have a few options of how to apply the dye/paint to your stamp. So this is much more viscous, older Dynaflow, and I freaking love this for block printing. It is so good. So I want to do a multicolor print. So I want some little golden in the middle of my flower. So that's what I'm going to use this for. So I'm going to use a paintbrush and I'm just going to apply that to the middle part. So I've put it on the middle of my flower and then I've used the sponge to get the pink on the outside. And then you can also see the bottle of very fresh, brand new Dynaflow. This is a cranberry red, very beautiful. And you can see how liquidy that is, right? So again, you can see the effects of the liquid as well and kind of how it gets everywhere versus I use a paintbrush with the more viscous stuff and it stays right where I want it. It doesn't flow everywhere. So old Dynaflow, amazing. This is also a great cheat way to get 2 colors on your block print. Back in the day, what they would do is they would make multiple blocks with different colors, right? So I would have made a separate block for that middle part, and then I would have, used each of them for the different colors. So this is a little shortcut for that, which you can do on a small scale. But if you were doing this in bulk back in the day and then sending it across the Silk Road and such, having them as separate pieces was definitely more convenient. So then I put it on the fabric, and this is what we have. You can see how that more viscous, delicious Dynaflow is kind of sticking out more. The other stuff is blending. It's a little spottier, a little more kind of watercolor effect, right? So they're each good for different reasons, right? And then again, you can definitely use like acrylic paint mixed with fabric medium, which is also really great for this. And there are like a million other things you can use. So this next step is really, really important, and I personally am bad at this. You need to let it sit and dry. So patience is a virtue. Go leave it. Go get some nice hot chocolate. Go play with your hamster. Go do something else. But you gotta let it sit. You gotta let that Dynaflow, all that stuff just soak in. Give it a chance to dry, right? Let it all soak in. Let it actually dry before you touch it for the next step, okay? And speaking of touching things, notice that I have been wearing gloves throughout this because a lot of dyes and paints are skin irritants. So you want to protect your skin. Also, if it can dye a protein fiber, it can dye your skin because you are made of protein, right? Obviously, it usually washes out after a while, but just best not to chance the irritation and having to wash your hands a million times and dry them out and all that, right? Also, just a reminder, please read the SDS sheets of any chemical that you use. I emailed the people who manufacture Dynaflow, Jacquard, and asked them for the SDS sheet for Dynaflow, and they graciously gave it to me, so thank you to them. And it doesn't have anything super toxic. It's mostly acrylic based. So there's nothing really horrible in it, but just don't mix it with acids is one of the big takeaways. And I always just wear my waterproof smock when I'm doing this kind of stuff. If there's any kind of splash risk, wear safety glasses and then gloves to protect my skin. And then if you're worried about any kind of inhalation problems, any respiratory issues, you can wear a mask, and yeah, please watch my video about dye safety so that you know what you're doing and what to look for. And from that video, just a reminder, if something says it's non-toxic, that does not necessarily mean it is safe. It is not a regulated term. It means very little, so be careful out there. It's a jungle. So now what you're going to do is heat set it. And what I've done is I usually take paper towels, but sometimes like scraps of muslin or whatever, and I put them underneath the item and on top. For paper towels, I do like 3 layers on top and 3 layers on bottom. This is so that when I am heat setting the dye, any extra dye or anything isn't going to transfer to the ironing table or to the iron. So it protects both of those things. And if there is any extra dye, paint, anything, it's going to transfer onto the paper towels and not onto my other things. You do have to heat set anything that has a fabric medium added to it, and you do have to heat set Dynaflow. What heat setting does is it makes it so that the dye is actually like set to your fabric, so that when I go and throw this in the washer and dryer, it's not going to bleed out, right? So what it does is it makes it so that that dye is bonded to the fabric. It's not going anywhere. So that's what keeps your dyes from bleeding. So you need to do it. It's a necessary step if you don't want bloody dyes. Yeah, so that's how you're going to get color transfer if you do a block print, and then, you wash your towels in there, and then now you've got Dynaflow all over your towels, right? There's even a scene about that in Spider-Man where he washes his Spider-Man suit with his whites and they've all turned pink, right? We've all been there. So this is why, is if the dye isn't set or if the discharge hasn't been washed off, that's how you get bleeding dyes. So this is why you read the labels of whatever you're using, read the instructions. For Dynaflow, it needs to be heat set for at least 30 seconds. Sometimes I throw things into the dryer. Sometimes I use a hair dryer. Sometimes I use an iron. It depends. So remember, read the instructions, set that dye so that your dye doesn't bleed, and you can have this beautiful block print and keep it nice and keep all your other stuff nice too. So then you're actually done, and now you can see this is actually heat set. The glossiness has gone away, the chunkiness, like everything is absorbed in, and it's heat set. You can also look and see the difference between like the more viscous Dynaflow versus the more flowy, just liquidy. So you can take a look at that, see the textural difference, and play around, have some fun, and yeah, please do a block print. Let me know if you do. I want to hear about it. I want to see them. I think they're so fun. It's just a cute little thing to do. So you can make it as complicated as you want. You can make it as simple as you want. It's, a 4,000-year-old amazing technique. So that's still just so fun today. So it's very cool. I hope you have fun. Please do it.
Well, that's it for me. Hambo wants to go home. So I'll see you on the next one. I hope you learned something, and I hope you had fun. I'll see you later.